Greetings, my fellow Americans. This is not the podcast I was going to do today. Today, I was going to do a podcast going back and talking about the situation and circumstances that led up to me becoming a political prisoner. Specifically, how the how the false allegation was manufactured, the details, why none of it should have ever happened. But it's an emotionally devastating topic for me, and it's incredibly personal. And in my mind, I had already written so much about this. I had the blogs, I had the autobiography, I had my petitions, I've published transcripts out there. And in my mind, as I was going through and creating this podcast and the various different episodes leading up to this one, I felt that there was enough reference material out there that if anybody wanted to know more details, they could go to it, they could find it. But it also occurred to me that I was taking that for granted. So I was going to do a podcast dealing with the details and the topic of the circumstances that first led up to my conviction, then talking about the process, maybe a later podcast talking about the process of the conviction or the process of the prosecution, and then talk about my time in prison. The problem is that this is such an emotional issue for me. There's a combination of factors. There's the trauma associated with this. I feel like I'm telling lies about myself. I feel like I'm having to dig up all the negative emotions and the hard emotions dealing with this allegation and the loss. I mean, I lost my son, I lost my family, I lost my business, I lost my good name, I lost everything, literally everything over a false allegation. And it wasn't even a false allegation that anyone really believed. It was just something brought to stop a lawsuit, and they didn't care. They obliterated my life to protect themselves from their own consequences. And when I say they, I'm talking about the corrupt officials in Kalispell and Flathead County government. I tell people it's akin to asking a rape victim to daily and repeatedly scribe in detail and minutia and answer all kinds of questions about their rape. What was he like? What did it feel like? What was the feelings? Did you like it? Was it something? Whatever unimaginable questions and invasive questions you could think to ask a rape victim have been asked of me over and over and over, and it is traumatic to keep telling this story, to keep doing this, knowing that I'm just spreading lies about myself. I am starting out with, it's not true, this is just what was done to me, but knowing that 90% of the people who hear this are just going to assume it's true and I'm denying it. I spent extra time in prison because I wouldn't admit. I got a longer sentence because I wouldn't admit. I faced further and harsher consequences because I won't confess to a crime I didn't commit. I've been tried to be thrown back in prison twice now because I won't admit, and I'm speaking out. Which brings up the second part and the second prong of the emotional duress for doing this. And that is the absolute terror and fear that doing this, talking about this again, is going to be retaliated against. If I talk about Mara and the things she did and the things she could have done, the things she didn't tell me, it stirs her up. She goes back to my probation officer. The prosecutors tries to say I'm harassing her, tries to file restraining orders that are just completely frivolous. I'm not doing anything to her other than trying to, still keep my case alive in court, which is still pending, by the way, since 2007. She took the business assets when I went to prison. She took everything for herself. And since 2007, the court will not let that case be heard in front of a jury. 2007. Have you ever heard of a civil case being open that long without going in front of a jury? No. But the court knows that if I go in front of a jury and I put the documents in front from the Secretary of State and say, this was my business, here's all the records, here's all the documentation, there's not a single thing with her name on it, and she took it all. There's no way a jury can come back who's not influenced by the corrupt agents at work here, who don't have a vested interest in the outcome of this, just judging truth or lie. They're going to look, there's no way they can look at that information and say, the business wasn't mine. and that I'm not entitled to a fair compensation, and then all the interest that's bearing off this has borne this case to be over $1 million claim. All because the court will not let a trial date happen. But every time I try to raise this issue, every time I start talking about it, every time I do an interview, she hears about it and she starts making up new garbage. She starts calling my probation officer, saying I'm threatening her online, saying, taking things out of context and saying that, I'm out here causing her harm or distress. I can't go to my neighbor, my friend's house, who is her neighbor, one of my longest friends. I have two oldest friends. I have Pam and I have Jean. Pam I haven't heard from in a while. She lives up in Libby. Last I heard, and she's a great insurance agent, just really busy, and just kind of fallen out of contact with her. But I still consider her my friend. Then I have Jean, who I talk with almost daily. I see almost weekly, oftentimes multiple times in a week. I'll be seeing her this afternoon. I can't visit her house. There's just chance being that Mara moved her trailer right next to where my friend Jean is living. And every time I go out and visit my friend Jean, and Mara finds out, Mara calls the police and says I'm threatening her, I'm terrorizing her. I'm visiting my friend. But she makes an excuse. She makes up anything. And it starts with me making these videos or making interviews or telling my story. The moment I start talking about her and the things she did, things she could have done, the collaboration she did with the authorities to help this conviction, to protect herself, that she stole all these assets, she starts calling up and making false complaints. She called the sheriff's department at one point and said that was going to kill somebody, bury the body, and blame her for it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is someone who has no bearing in truth and doesn't care about what lies she tells. And so there's her. There's, of course, the authorities who don't want this information out. They don't want the truth to come out. And so they bury me. They're the ones who come down and say, you can't talk about this. They're the ones who go back and censor, so I can't say my alleged victim's name, which is the third prong. Every time I try to do this, my emotions get the better of me, and logic takes a back seat, and I'm not allowed to say my alleged victim's name. I can't say the eldest stepdaughter I had. I can't say her name, because if I do, I go to prison for 15 years. Nobody in the state of Montana has that restriction, but I can't do an audio recording and tell a detailed story of events and circumstances and not slip and say her name. It's just, I get wrapped up in the emotions and I'm trying to force myself through it. Next thing I know, whoops, I slipped and said her name, and I got to record that whole section all over again. So between the trauma of recounting this horrific experience in my life and the emotional baggage and the emotional harm it's caused me and the duress it's caused me and the fear of revocation and the fear of retaliation and the fear of people like Mara and others just making up more garbage against me just so people will stop listening to these podcasts and listening to anything else, and then the fact that I can't even say her name, and it's just so hard to be able to go through this emotionally charged and emotionally just devastating story and let my emotions out and not slip and say her name. And it's just so hard to do this. It's so hard. It's so hard to sit here and know people hate you for nothing you ever did. Just, they hate you. They hate you. I don't know how this. Just talking about it. I'm going to sign off. I'm only posting this because I need to post something today. I just needed to post something today to try to keep my word to the people who do watch this, who do log in to expect. Understand the reason why the subject didn't get posted is because of this. This is hard. No one understands it. No one understands it. Please review the subject, the content. Please, if you want to support the podcast, please support the podcast. Contact Bill if you're under supervision or in jail because they can't talk to you directly. Of course, the material physical donations, the address is there. I'm sorry, I can't even go through the script of everything here. I'm going to sign off, and as always, please, if at all possible, be free. And I'll hopefully see you on Tuesday.